What happens when a 13-year-old white girl walks into a bank with $950 in cash? Maybe she gets a compliment, a warm smile, or someone says, "Wow, this one knows how to save." Good for her. But what if a 13-year-old black girl does the exact same thing? The bank calls the police. No evidence, no questions, just one look, and that's enough for suspicion. Nia Caldwell didn't steal. The money in the envelope was from a youth architecture scholarship, a birthday gift from her grandmother, a tiny dream stepping quietly into the adult world. She stood there with a soft smile and a completed deposit slip, but what Nia didn't know was in that room. Everything she brought in would be seen as too much for a kid who looked like her. And Gwen Talley, the branch manager who made the call, had no idea. She had just reported the daughter of a woman who once served as a federal financial crimes investigator, a woman who had previously audited that very same bank for quiet racial bias, and who still holds the access credentials to records Gwen thought were buried for good. Before we get into this story, tell us where you're watching from. Comment below. And if you've ever been dismissed, ever been blocked, ever been underestimated just because you didn't look like them, subscribe and stay with us, because the story you're about to hear might be the one you've been holding in silence all this time. This story doesn't start with a gunshot. It doesn't begin with a protest. It begins with a glass bank door swinging open, and a young girl stepping through carrying nothing but a dream of being treated fairly. 13 years old, a worn backpack, a faded cardigan, and a cream-colored envelope tucked neatly between the pages of a green notebook. Nia Caldwell stepped off the bus like someone who had planned every detail. Not the kind of grown-too-soon child shaped by hardship, but the kind raised to stand tall on the sidewalk, to apologize if she stumbled, and to say I'd like to open an account without her voice shaking. Today was a special day. Not a birthday. Not a field trip. But the first day Nia would walk into a bank on her own, a place her mother once called a territory of invisible power. A place most black folks were never taught to walk into calmly, but rather cautiously. But Nia wasn't cautious. She had practiced the right phrases. She'd studied the steps to open an account. She brought all the paperwork, birth certificate, school ID, and a copy of her new summer architecture scholarship. And in the cream envelope handed to her by her grandmother was $950. Crisp bills, 20s, 50s, hundreds, flattened, sorted, folded like a thank you letter. As she stepped into Summit First Credit Bank, a chill from the central air rolled across her shoulders. Marble floors, leather chairs, that signature mix of printer ink, fresh paper, and expensive cologne. Nia paused, just a second, then breathed in and kept walking. There was nothing to fear. She approached the teller station. 3 employees were present. One blonde woman smiled warmly at a suited customer, but when her eyes met Nia's, the smile dropped, like someone had flipped the light off. Another clerk scowled and glanced toward the end of the counter. Only one man, light brown skin. Curly hair met Nia's gaze with a small nod, but he said nothing. Nia didn't blame them. She still believed in politeness, in procedures, in the promise that if she followed every rule, spoke respectfully, and came prepared, things would go as outlined on the bank's website. She stepped up to the nearest station. A silver nameplate read Jennifer M., Customer Service Lead. Nia smiled, and in a clear, practiced voice, said, "Good afternoon. I'd like to open my first personal account." Jennifer didn't reply. She looked down at the envelope in Nia's hand, then slowly back up. No greeting, no warmth. And that was the first moment Nia felt it, that there are places where even with proper ID and real money, you're still not considered enough. Nia unzipped her bag with careful precision, like she was reaching for something far more valuable than cash. Inside, under her scholarship papers and a small water bottle, was the cream envelope, not old, but softened at the edges. She lifted it out gently. Inside, $950 in bills, sorted, stacked, and bound by a thin red ribbon, like a wedding invite. Before handing it to Nia, her grandmother had said, "Money might get you judged, but how you carry it makes them question their judgment." Nia untied the ribbon, opened the envelope. No rush, no flash, just placed the money beside her documents, then looked up with a gentle smile. "I have everything I need. This is scholarship money and a birthday gift from my grandma. I'd like to deposit it into a new account." She had rehearsed this, in the mirror, with her mother. Tone calm, posture upright, eye contact firm, not confrontational. Jennifer didn't respond. She didn't touch the papers. She didn't touch the money. She didn't ask any follow-ups. Her eyes, however, scanned each bill like they'd just been pulled from a stolen cash drawer. Her lips twitched. Her breath changed. Then came her voice, dry and crumpled like carbon copy paper. "Cash." Nia nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Jennifer stared, this time, longer. She leaned forward, fingers laced like a prosecutor about to read charges. "This money, from a scholarship, from your grandmother." Nia kept her smile. "Yes, ma'am. Architecture program and birthday." Jennifer's voice shifted, silky but sharp like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Are you sure not from somewhere else?" A pause. Nia felt tension climb her spine. Her hands stayed still on the table, but her palms were damp. Not from fear. From realizing, for the first time, this woman wasn't asking to understand. She was asking to trap. Jennifer leaned back, still not touching the money. Instead, she flicked her eyes to the bank's internal phone. And in that moment, Nia stopped smiling. A silent press of the phone line, a glance toward the back lobby. And then, everything changed. Jennifer no longer looked at her. She straightened her collar, pulled her hands in, as if her part was done and someone higher up would take over. Nia knew someone was coming. She didn't know who, but the air had shifted, tight, cold, tinted with that distinct scent. The kind that tells you a place is no longer yours. Footsteps echoed from the right corridor, slow, measured, certain, like someone who'd mastered the art of authority without saying a word. A white woman appeared, dark brown hair, neatly pinned, sharp eyeliner, cool-toned blush, a charcoal suit tailored like a military uniform. Gwen Talley, Vice Branch Manager of Summit First Credit. Her name was stamped in silver on the plate over her heart. But Nia didn't need the plate. The room had already told her this woman was in charge. Gwen looked at Nia. 1 second. Not 2. Just long enough for her gaze to scan Nia head to toe like TSA scanning for a threat. No greeting. No, "How can I help you?" No questions. Just 1 sentence, ice cold. "So, where does a little girl like you get money like this?" Nia leaned back, not physically but emotionally. She opened her mouth to respond, but realized that question didn't want an answer. It was a verdict, disguised as a question. "I already explained," Nia said quietly, "scholarship and birthday." Gwen tilted her head. Cute story." Then turned to Jennifer. Didn't say a word. But the glance, the micro-nod was enough. A signal. A confirmation of a plan they'd agreed on silently. Jennifer shrugged. Feigned helplessness. "She says it's from her grandma." Gwen scoffed softly. Not a sound. just a sneer at the corner of her lips. Grandmas are generous these days. She turned back, planted both hands on the counter, leaned in like she was about to whisper. But her voice carried loud enough for the next 3 people in line. Tell me, Nia, are you absolutely sure you didn't find this in someone else's purse? It wasn't a question, it was bait. Wrapped in professional tone, Nia looked around. A black man in the waiting area watched silently. An Asian woman buried her face in her phone. No one said a word. And that's when Nia realized, sometimes silence isn't neutrality, it's complicity. The air inside the bank was colder than before, not because of the AC, but because everything was being funneled toward Nia. Every word, every stare, every second of silence like a hammer tapping against tile. Still, she stayed calm. From her bag, Nia pulled out a slim folder. Inside, everything had been organized just as her mother taught her. Birth certificate, student ID, scholarship award letter from the Junior Architecture Institute, recent middle school transcript, a handwritten letter from her grandmother, neatly signed. Nia gently slid the documents toward the branch manager. I brought all the paperwork, ma'am. If you need to verify, I can walk you through each one. Gwen Talley didn't respond. She glanced down but didn't touch a thing. Just a quick flick of the eyes, cold, dismissive, like someone swiping away a pop-up ad on their phone. Then she reached out, barely using her fingertips as if she might get something on her hands. She scraped the documents into a pile and set them aside. No questions, no review, just one line, dropped like it had been practiced. I've seen fakes better than this. Nia frowned. I don't understand. These are real. You can check the school code or call the architecture program. That won't be necessary. Gwen's voice sliced through her sentence like scissors through silk. Emotionless. Final. Kids your age, especially from this part of town, they know how to make things look official. Nia wanted to ask what part of town, but she didn't. She swallowed it. Silence. Gwen rested her elbows on the counter, interlocked her fingers, tilted her head. Do you know how many fake letters we've seen over the years? How many kids walked in with forged documents, hoping we wouldn't catch it? Nia replied, soft but steady. I'm not those kids. Gwen pressed her lips together. A slow, sarcastic nod. Of course you're not. Then a dry laugh, mean-spirited and low. The entire room fell still. No customer spoke, no employee looked up. Everyone seemed to be waiting, not for clarity, but for a scene they'd seen before and knew better than to interrupt. Nia looked down at her documents shoved aside like old printer scraps. And for the first time in her life, she understood. There are places where you can bring every document, every receipt, every reason to be trusted, and it still won't be enough. Silence, but not the peaceful kind, like in a library, and not the respectful kind either. This was something else, cold, lingering, calculated, like when everyone in the room knows something's wrong but no one wants to be the first to say it. Still, Nia stood tall, her hands resting lightly on the counter, like she was reminding herself, this is just a misunderstanding. Be polite, be patient, and the adults will fix it. But no one did. Jennifer, the first teller, had backed away, now busy paperclipping another file, avoiding all eye contact. Gwen remained silent. She flipped a form in her hand, not reading it, just stalling, waiting. Waiting for Nia to confess something she hadn't done. In the waiting area, an elderly man in a wrinkled shirt glanced up. His eyes met Nia's for exactly 1 second. A middle-aged woman filling out a form looked up, hesitated, then looked back down. A young white guy near the ATM raised his phone but didn't hit record, just held it there, then lowered it again, scanning the room, seeing if anyone else would intervene. No one did. Nia slowly turned her head. No one looked away, but no one held her gaze either. It was a kind of passive resistance, a quiet rejection. No one told her she was wrong, but everyone let the wrong unfold. Gwen pulled a pen from a holder and tapped it 3 times against the counter, not saying a word, just watching Nia, waiting. For an apology, a breakdown, a confession that would never come. Well, she finally said, "Do you have anything else to prove this money is yours?" Nia swallowed. I have a letter from my grandmother. Maybe you'd like to—" "A letter from your grandma." Gwen raised an eyebrow. "Unless she's the CEO of this bank, I'm not sure how that helps us." The room froze. No papers rustled, no printers hummed. Only the wall clock clicked. Tick, tick, tick. Nia suddenly felt cold along her spine, not from the air, but from the sensation of being looked at without anyone standing beside you, and she realized this silence wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Gwen Talley picked up the internal phone and dialed 3. Not in a rush, not alarmed, just calmly like she was ordering floor cleaner or a cappuccino. "This is Talley. I have a possible fraudulent attempt by an unaccompanied minor. Window 2. Yes. Female. African American." Her voice was flat, unfeeling, not a ripple of doubt or care. Nia heard every word as clear as a bell. And she understood. In that moment, everything she brought wasn't evidence anymore. It was suspicion, not because the documents were flawed, but because the woman in front of her wanted to believe they were, and had decided that suspicious looked like her. Gwen set the phone down so gently it made no sound, then leaned back, arms folded, watching Nia like an actress waiting for her cue. "For the record," she said, "we have protocols, especially when minors come in alone with large amounts of cash." Nia opened her mouth. "But I didn't do anything wrong." "It's not personal." Gwen cut her off. "It's procedure." Those 3 words, "it's not personal," didn't sting because they were cruel. They stung because they were perfectly false. Jennifer stood a few steps away, holding another file, not opening it, not looking at Nia, not looking at Gwen, just staring down. As if none of this concerned her, though she had started it. Nia bit her lip, not because she was about to cry, but because she didn't know what to do next. Her mother once told her, "There will be times when you do everything right and still get treated like you're wrong, not because you are, but because they wrote the definition of right without you in it." Now she understood. A man in a gray shirt stepped forward. Assistant floor manager. His badge said so. Gwen didn't look up, just nodded. He looked at Nia, and this time, there was something in his face, something like regret. He turned to Gwen. "Do we need to escalate?" Gwen didn't respond right away. She picked up a pen and scribbled something on a slip. "We'll see how she responds." Nia wasn't standing quite as tall anymore, not because she was scared, but because she finally understood. This wasn't about money or documents. This was about the right to be believed. And here today she didn't have that right. Gwen lowered her head, as if typing into the system, but before she did, she gave Nia one last look. Sharp, final, like a period at the end of a sentence. "Let's follow protocol." Nia took half a step back, eyes forward, no words. Because when prejudice dresses up as procedure, it doesn't have to shout. It only needs paperwork. Now, The air was no longer uncertain, no longer just suspicious, no longer about verification. It had become a silent standoff between a child standing alone and a system trained to doubt girls who looked like her. Nia knew she had to say something, not to resist, but to salvage a chance to be treated like just another person. She swallowed, lifted her chin. My mom can explain. She used to work in banking. Gwen showed no surprise, no curiosity, just a barely visible smirk small enough to seem polite, sharp enough to cut straight through Nia. I'm sure she did, Gwen replied, her tone a blend of mockery and quiet verdict. She didn't ask who her mother was, didn't ask where she worked, didn't need to verify, because in Gwen's mind, the conclusion was already filed, and that smirk was her signature of dismissal. Nia looked around, still the same silence, still the same glances that floated past her, like people dodging a collision they didn't want to explain. Even the young teller who'd nodded at her earlier was now gone, tucked behind a partition. No one was standing with her. She took a breath. She was a federal banking examiner. Gwen raised an eyebrow. What? She worked for the Office of Civil Rights and Financial Regulation. She audited banks. Okay, Gwen interrupted. Enough stories. Her voice wasn't loud, not angry, just final like a door clicking shut. Listen, I'm giving you two options. She picked up her pen, tapping it on the counter in slow rhythm. Either I call your legal guardian, or I call law enforcement. No third option, no space for explanation, no tell me more. Nia blinked. But I haven't done anything wrong. Gwen shook her head, eyes averted. It's just protocol. There it was again. Protocol. Used like a shield to cover what no one wanted to say out loud, not because it was lawful, but because it was learned, stitched into every thread of that cold gray blazer. Nia took a small step back. Please, can I just call my mom? Gwen tilted her head. You can, if the police let you? A simple line, but carefully chosen. It meant even the right to call your mother was no longer yours. A chime rang from the entrance. Someone stepped inside, but Nia didn't turn to look. She didn't care who had entered, because in that moment, she realized. It didn't matter how calmly she spoke, how complete her paperwork was, how reasonable her explanations were. Everything had been dismissed with one nod and 2 words protocol. Logic wouldn't save her now, because the person across the counter wasn't looking for truth. She was looking for a reason to keep her bias alive. So, should I call your guardian? Or should I call law enforcement? The question hung in the air, but it wasn't really a question. There was no question mark in Gwen's tone, only a full stop. Nia didn't move. She could feel the cold tile under her soft soles. The air around her thickened, heavier. The outside world fading, like the revolving door had sealed shut and left her on the wrong side of it. I'd like to call my mom, Nia whispered. That's not what I asked, Gwen snapped. Guardian or police, pick one. Nia turned her head, searching, hoping for a kind face, a voice saying, she's just a kid. But no one spoke. Off to the right, a black woman in her 40s sat with a leather bag in her lap, watching. Her eyes met Nia's. And for one brief moment a heartbeat. No more there was understanding. Then the woman looked away. Not because she didn't care, but because she knew what happened to black people who stood up in rooms that didn't belong to them. Gwen waited, unmoving, still, like a scale already tipped, just waiting for a nod before the hammer fell. Nia pressed her lips together. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear but from pressure from being cornered into two wrong choices. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "I didn't steal anything. I told you where it came from." Gwen shrugged. "Then this should be quick and easy. Let them sort it out. That's what they're here for." "Let them sort it out." Not "let's talk," not "we'll check," not a single word suggesting belief. Just pass it along. Let someone bigger, colder, finish what Gwen had started. Another banker passed by. A young woman with curly hair and a high bun, white blouse and a stiff walk. She glanced at Nia, blinking, almost said something, but kept walking. Another person who chose silence. Another person who left Nia alone with a question dressed up as a choice. Nia inhaled deeply. "I want to call my mom." Gwen shook her head. "Guardian. Non-negotiable. If not, I'll proceed with law enforcement. That's the policy." Policy? The fourth time Nia had heard that word in under 10 minutes. And each time, it felt more like a pair of invisible handcuffs fastening around the wrists of truth. A faint siren sounded outside the glass. Not blaring. Just the subtle signal of blue lights arriving. Heads turned. A conversation in the corner paused. A pen fell to the ground. No one picked it up. Gwen straightened her collar, smoothed her hands across the desk, like preparing for a boardroom presentation. That flicker of satisfaction appeared again, brief, but undeniable. An expression that said, "Everything's going according to plan." No need to yell, no rush, just procedure. Nia stood still. No more questions. No more trying to explain. She wasn't hoping for reason. She wasn't expecting help. Everyone had already had their chance and they had chosen to stand still. Her gaze drifted to the window. Two police officers, one male, one female, stepped out of the cruiser. One reached for his radio, the other adjusted her belt, where the handcuffs hung. Nia still hadn't cried. Not once. But something in her eyes had shifted. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even disappointment. It was knowledge. Cold, still, and quiet about how the world really worked. The automatic door slid open. Wind rushed in. Leather soles tapped steadily across marble tile. Gwen stepped out first, said something softly to the officers, pointed to Nia. The male officer nodded. No questions. No checks. Just moved toward her. Nia gripped her bag strap, stood tall. "Are you the one with the cash?" the officer asked. She nodded. "Yes, it's mine." He didn't respond, just looked to Gwen, then back. "We're going to need you to step outside." "Can I call my mom now?" Nia asked one last time. Gwen cut in before he could answer. "She'll get her chance to explain at the station." A long silence. No one in the lobby spoke. An Asian woman half rose from her seat, then sat back down. A black man lifted his phone, filmed, but low, at waist level, quiet. This wasn't confusion anymore. It was conscious complicity. Nia walked past them all, under the gaze of grown-ups who said nothing. Each step heavier than the last. Not because she was tired, but because she understood. She wasn't the first black child to be suspected for having money. She was just the one they chose to call the police on. In broad daylight, in a bank her mother once investigated. And no one realized. They were arresting the wrong person and awakening the wrong silence. The phone vibrated softly on the mahogany desktop. No ringtone, no flashing light, just a low, brief tremor like a signal meant only for its owner. Dr. Lennox Caldwell looked up from her laptop. Light from the window reflected off her thin metal frames. She picked up the phone and unlocked it with her fingerprint. A text message from the lone number labeled override emergency. Just 6 words. Bank, denied, police, Summit branch, alone. No punctuation. No explanation. No need. Lennox set the phone back down but didn't take her eyes off the message. Not hurried, not panicked, just still. But her eyes had changed. She didn't need to ask who sent it. No guessing needed. There was only one person who could so succinctly and so coldly map out the situation. Nia, her daughter, and 7 years of training in silence were now signaling an alarm. It wasn't that the child couldn't defend herself. It was that the outside world was unfolding exactly as Lennox had feared and predicted. Lennox rose from her desk. Her office was immaculate, nothing out of place. On the wall, 2 doctoral diplomas, one in financial law, one in institutional behavior analysis. On her bookshelf, bank audit manuals, histories of institutional racism in lending, internal reports from her days as a federal inspector. In the corner stood a heavy, triple-locked filing cabinet. She opened it. Removed a folder labeled in red. Summit First Credit, Region 3, Deferred Review 2015. She had investigated this very bank, this branch. The case was shelved for lack of quantitative evidence. She never forgot, just waited for the right moment. She checked the phone again, then opened her contacts under special access. She didn't call her husband. She didn't call a friend. She didn't call a lawyer. She called the old secure line one few were still permitted to use. Caldwell, code 4117 active. Personal flag, incident in progress. Request silent trigger on Summit branch, District 3. There was no Y from the other end. Just received, confirming activation. Lennox didn't change clothes or apply makeup. She grabbed her long coat and a printed copy of Basic U.S. Banking Civil Rights. She looked at the 6-word alert again, a signal that had awakened a part of her she'd hidden away for 7 years. The part that knew how to dismantle a system using the very rules it used to hide behind. She picked up her keys. The office door closed softly behind her, and the first covert audit in years had begun. Her office wasn't luxurious, no decorative frills, just enough light, neatly aligned shelves, and that triple-locked steel cabinet she buried the untold records in. Lennox sat back down, phone placed beside her. She opened the second drawer. Inside were folders sorted by year, each labeled with year and type, but no bank name. She flicked through a case in Georgia, another in Missouri, an internal review denied, all tied to silent discrimination in financial services. She stopped at a gray folder, edges worn. Her handwriting on the cover. Summit First Credit, Region 3 branch. Investigation paused 2015 due to lack of quantitative evidence. Note, monitor recurrence. She removed the folder and set it on the desk. Inside were charts, account denial rates by zip code, comparison of service disparities between white and non-white customers, branch meeting notes marked with euphemisms like additional verification required. She turned to a faded map page, zip zones shaded with marker green for white majority, yellow for mixed neighborhoods, red for Black and Hispanic communities. In the center of a red zone, a black circle labeled Summit First, Nia's branch. Lennox sat quietly, not angry, not trembling, but her expression had hardened. This wasn't old history anymore. This was present evidence. On the last page, in red ink, her own note from 9 years ago. Insufficient evidence now, but if the system doesn't change, these biases will repeat. Then we won't file another report. We'll act. She closed the folder. No need to read more. The proof was clear. The bias had returned. And this time, the target wasn't a random customer. it was her daughter, the child of the woman who once shaped the laws they were now breaking. Lennox rose and prepared to leave. She didn't grab heavy reports, just a single printout, the 12 basic civil rights of U.S. bank customers. Dr. Lennox Caldwell sat a moment longer, hand resting on the old file, unhurried, not anxious. Steady certainty rose inside her, not anger, but a cold resolve. She opened her phone and dialed a long unused number labeled only by initials. She hadn't saved the name, just XYZ. The male voice on the other end answered quicker than she remembered. "Caldwell," she said. "Activate my legacy monitor rights. Summit first, branch 3. He replied softly. "We're aware. Standing by." She nodded, though unseen. The call ended in 8 seconds, not a word more. She unlocked a veteran software program. On screen connecting, then silence. No confirmation needed. Lennox didn't require proof that it was working. She just needed to know it was being recorded. She stood. The office lay silent as when she entered. Except now, silence was no longer waiting. It was the start. She opened the drawer and took the secure USB, sliding it into her coat pocket. No thick binders, no official reports, just the civil rights summary. And one more thing, her memory. She looked at the Summit folder one last time. Its cover still bore her own writing. The system repeats unless someone stops it. She closed the folder and put it back, but this time, she didn't lock it. Before leaving, she checked the 6-word text once again. Bank, denied, police, Summit branch, alone. A simple line, but within it lay a corrupt system and a child criminalized for having the audacity to have money. Lennox exhaled slowly, grasped her car keys. The house door closed behind her. Afternoon light dimmed as the foyer sank into shade. No legal teams, no public statement. Just a mother who once wrote the laws now returning to enforce them in her own way. A matte black SUV pulled up in front of the Summit First Credit Bank branch exactly at 3:11 p.m. No siren, no screech of brakes, no sign of an impending storm. Just a door opening and a woman stepping out. Dr. Lennox Caldwell. Her hair in a tight bun, wearing a knee-length coat, carrying a small leather satchel, no badge, no business cards, no announcement needed. Her presence alone shifted the atmosphere. Inside the bank, Gwen Talley stood calmly by the counter. Her conversation with the police was going smoothly. Jennifer lingered in the background, quiet, unassuming. Nia sat nearby on a low chair, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the bank's glass door. She watched the SUV park and the woman step out. No one else noticed. Nia alone knew. Her mother had arrived. And oddly, Nia didn't feel relief or joy. She stood still, knowing nothing would ever be the same from this moment. Lennox walked through the automatic doors. Neither rush nor hesitation. Her heels clicked steadily on the marble floor, sure, unannounced. Everyone in the bank turned their heads. Not because she was loud, but because her presence carried a weight that made the room shrink. A male officer glanced at her. He didn't recognize her. He just knew she wasn't there to make a deposit. Gwen's brow tightened. "Can I help you?" she asked. Politeness strained with annoyance. Lennox didn't reply immediately. She looked Gwen in the eye, then toward Nia. A brief glance was enough for Nia to rise. Lennox took a step forward. "You called the police on a child." Her voice steady, as though delivering testimony. Gwen frowned. "This is a private matter, if you're not. I am her mother." Silence. No one spoke. The officers exchanged glances. Jennifer looked confused at Gwen. Lennox pulled out an unbranded, plain ID card worn with age. When Gwen took it, her expression changed. Lips pressed tight, knuckles whitened. "You were with the Federal Banking Division." "I still am," Lennox replied. The silence that followed felt taut like a drawn bow. No threats needed. Her presence alone said enough. They'd made a grave mistake with the wrong person. Gwen stared at the ID card, didn't touch it, just stared, then looked up. I didn't realize." "No," Lennox corrected gently. "You didn't. And that's the problem." No one interrupted. Jennifer stood frozen. The officers stepped back, sensing the tension. Lennox met Gwen's gaze directly. "Let me be clear. You detained a minor. You denied her the right to call her parent. You assumed criminal intent without any investigation, and you labeled it suspicious, simply because you could." Gwen stumbled over her words. She had no proof. She had documentation. She had an ID. She had a scholarship letter, a school record, and an account statement from this very bank. Gwen fell silent. Lennox didn't raise her voice. She didn't cut Gwen off. No drama. Because the facts carried their own weight. "You called the police on a child," Lennox continued, "and not because she broke any rules, but because you couldn't imagine she belonged here." Among the onlookers, one person shivered. No one moved. No one spoke. Lennox didn't scan the room. She only looked at Gwen like someone holding a mirror up to her actions. Your bias wasn't subtle. It was systemic, and it's documented. Gwen clenched her fists. I was following procedure." Lennox nodded slowly. "And I was once the one who wrote those procedures. So believe me when I say this was not procedure, this was profiling." No one spoke again. No shouting. No demands. Just truth, laid bare like a mirror Gwen could no longer avoid. At that moment, Gwen didn't see an angry mother. She saw a version of herself with superior authority yet facing someone who actually understood what those rules meant. Lennox didn't need to be loud. She didn't need redundancy. Just one statement, calmly delivered from the center of the room. "Pull every camera angle, now." No questions. No verification request. No badge check. Because of how she said it. Not a command, but a cold, unwrapping verdict. The guard signaled to the security tech, who slipped into the monitoring room through a side door. Within a minute, a surveillance monitor appeared at the central counter. Not for customers. This was internal review equipment hidden, never shown. But today, everything was being exposed in broad daylight. Customers remained motionless. The black woman who had looked at Nia earlier now rose. The white teen by the ATM lowered his phone, but his grip tightened. An older man in the second row put a hand to his chest. No one left. No one spoke. Because they knew what was about to unfold was rarely seen. A black girl standing tall in a bank, demanding truth. The screen flickered on. The footage rolled frame by frame from the moment Nia entered. No sped-up edits. No dramatic cuts. Just the girl's steady walk, presenting documents, offering a forced smile, the clerk's dismissive gaze, and Gwen's disdain. No violence, no chaos. Just arrogant behavior, preserved in unflinching clarity. Lennox didn't watch the footage. She already knew what it showed. She watched Gwen's face. With each frame, Gwen's defenses cracked. I didn't know she... You didn't care who she was, Lennox finished. You only saw who you thought she couldn't be. Quiet, but in that hostage-like stillness, it thundered. Jennifer stepped back. still clutching paperwork as if shielding herself. No more excuses. She'd seen herself on screen barring truth from a child. A child who, now, everyone saw belonged. Lennox turned to the guard. "I want a copy of that footage, and I want a record of who authorized holding her without parental contact." Her tone remained steady, measured, as if ice cracking beneath itself. This wasn't confrontation. It was an on-site investigation, and no one dared move, because no one wanted to miss this moment. The small monitor at the central counter kept playing. No one touched the remote. No one asked it to be turned off. The room held its breath as if the outside world paused for something far more important, the truth. The next clip wasn't of Nia. It was a video from 2 months earlier. A middle-aged black man, white shirt, walking in with his daughter. He presented paperwork to Jennifer. His face was calm, collected. Jennifer offered a polite smile at first, then called Gwen over. The camera recorded Gwen stepping up, standing straight, pointing at the documents. No sound, just footage. The man raised his hand, explained something. Gwen shook her head. The two turned away, denied an account. The screen advanced. This time, a younger Hispanic woman in nurse scrubs stood alone, presenting papers. Jennifer checked them. Gwen arrived, looked, shook her head again. Same desk, same position, same line in internal notes. "Does not meet our policy requirements." 3 clips, then 4, then 5. Different faces, but all shared the same skin tone, the same distrust in Gwen's gaze, the same result: denied service. No real explanation. All recorded by the system, all managed directly by Gwen. No one in the bank spoke. An older customer touched his chest. A young woman pulled out her phone not to film, but to take notes. A teller behind the counter quietly stepped out, watching. No sobs, no anger, just silence, not because people didn't see what was happening, but because everyone understood they had witnessed something undeniable. Lennox didn't say a word. She just stood there, eyes fixed on the screen. No expression, no need for confrontation. Because Gwen had already shown herself on camera, the footage spoke louder than any accusation. Gwen took a half step back. These were isolated incidents. Each case is. No. Each clip is a pattern. And that pattern is the evidence. Her voice wasn't loud or rushed, but it landed like a stone dropped on a still pond, creating ripples no one could ignore. The camera kept rolling, more footage cued. But no one needed to see more. What needed to be known was already clear. No one spoke. No policy could cover the truth now laid open. The entire bank felt stripped bare. Lennox didn't need more proof. She simply needed a name, the person in charge of this branch. "I want to meet the regional manager," she said, still focused on the frozen frame a black customer denied, her document set aside. Jennifer didn't react. The lone teller who dared meet the footage's truth nodded and walked inside. Under 2 minutes later, a silver-haired man appeared. Light gray suit, tidy tie, no emotion on his face, but his eyes told the story. He looked at the footage, at Lennox, then at Gwen. "I thought this was fixed years ago." Gwen's mouth moved, but no words came. He dropped his gaze, sighed. "You lied on the compliance form." 4 words, no explanation needed. No one needed to speak, because every link in that chain was present before them. The document checker, the approved policy sign-off, the pledge to non-discrimination. All were here, and all had gone, silent, long enough for injustice to take root. The regional manager didn't sit. He stood, eyes locked on Gwen. "You told me everything was routine, that you reviewed all complaints, that there was no bias in your approval process." Gwen swallowed. "I believed what I saw, these situations." "You believed what you wanted," he interrupted, "and ignored what you were trained to question." Those words weren't loud, but they rang like a bell in an empty sanctuary. Lennox stayed silent. She only watched the manager. "I filed a report about this branch 9 years ago," she said. "It was shelved, deferred, labeled lack of conclusive data." He nodded, slowly. No defense, no denial. "That's on me." 3 words, short, honest. Gwen looked around. No one backed her. Jennifer remained silent. The other teller avoided eye contact. The officers didn't speak. Customers stayed put. A chain of silence passed through each person in this room, and today, it broke. Right here. The regional manager pulled out his phone. "I need internal audit at Branch 3. Today. Send all data to corporate." He hung up, sighed, then looked at Lennox. "You don't need to say more. The system spoke and we've heard it." Dr. Lennox Caldwell remained where she stood, didn't flinch, didn't back down, just kept her gaze on Gwen Talley across the counter. The bank stood still, not because someone yelled, not because someone was removed, but because everyone understood something deeper had been triggered not in their computers, but within the structure of authority. Lennox took out her phone, not hiding, not retreating. She turned slightly enough for all to hear. "Activate Review Order 418. Her voice steady, neither high nor low. The reply came 2 words. "Understood." Then silence. Call ended. No identity checks, no code reconfirmation, because those with real authority don't need explanations when the evidence is this clear. She turned back to Gwen, her eyes no longer angry, nor disappointed, but composed a cold certainty, lethal in its quiet. "You were never supposed to get this far." That sentence stopped time. No court ruling needed. Gwen opened her mouth, found no words, because she knew nothing she said could undo what had already been dismantled. The regional manager watched Gwen, then turned away. He took out a notebook, wrote a line, closed it, no questions asked. The screen held on the final frame, a black customer walking away empty-handed, face not angry but too accustomed to disappointment to show surprise. Lennox looked at the screen and said, 9 years ago, we offered this bank a blueprint for change. They nodded, signed the forms, held a workshop, and then nothing. Gwen lowered her head, not from guilt, but because she knew she had forfeited the right to hold it up. "You turned policy into armor," Lennox continued, "but you wore it wrong. You used it to shield yourself from accountability, not to protect the people it was meant to serve." A guard exhaled quietly, not in anger, just lowered his head, clearly understanding the cost of silence. Lennox glanced at the tech who'd brought up the footage. "Send all recordings to Internal Affairs, and send a copy to my office." He nodded. No address asked. He knows who she is. Finally, Lennox turned back to Gwen, voice no longer frosty, only calm and real. "We wrote these rules to keep things fair, but fairness only works if people like you don't treat them like suggestions." The bank was as quiet as ever, but now that silence was no longer escape, it was an alarm bell. Dr. Lennox Caldwell left Summit First Credit Bank without a threat. No press followed her, no angry social media posts, no press conference, no hashtags. She didn't need any of it, because someone trained to investigate truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. The next morning, at exactly 6:47 a.m., A classified document was transmitted to the U.S. Department of Treasury. Sender, Dr. Lennox Caldwell. Subject request to reopen federal civil rights investigation, Summit First Credit, District 3. This time, she wasn't filing on behalf of any organization. She wasn't representing any committee. This time, she was the complainant. Inside the file was a detailed account of the past 72 hours, including clear evidence of racial discrimination, the unlawful denial of a minor's right to contact a guardian, the misuse of policy as a cover for personal bias, a repeated pattern of misconduct, backed by internal surveillance footage. She attached an old case file, the same one shelved 9 years ago, along with a handwritten note. This time, we don't need more proof. They've already provided it themselves. When the Treasury staff opened the file, they weren't surprised. They knew her name, they knew the history, and they knew when she files. Something too serious to ignore has already happened. Gwen wasn't sued. She wasn't dragged into court. Because Lennox understood, punishing a person doesn't change a system, but exposing a system to those in power forces it to retract its own claws. At the bank branch, no one dared mention Lennox's name, but everyone knew emails were being reviewed. Internal reports were being matched line by line. A special audit team had been requested for an in-person investigation. Gwen received a call on the third day. Not from Lennox, from the regional executive office. They requested she step down temporarily pending investigation. No explanation. No public announcement. But in banking, when silence replaces answers, it means your name has already been crossed out in invisible ink. Lennox didn't speak to reporters. She didn't appear on TV. She left only one sentence in the memo attached to her Treasury file. Silence is not weakness. It's how we gather the evidence you never thought to hide. That Friday morning, Gwen Talley arrived earlier than usual. Same gray suit, same unsweetened coffee, same upright walk, trying not to betray anything. But the air had changed. She knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. No one said a word. No one had to. Her desk had been cleared, not trashed, not empty, just stripped of everything personal. The family photo, her favorite ceramic mug, the highlighters she always used. All neatly placed in a cardboard box at the side of her desk. Orderly. Precise. Done by someone who had done this many times before. No formal memo. No email from headquarters. No internal note. Just a single sheet of paper, face down on the desk. One line. Typed. Termination by management decision. No date, no reason, no signature. Yet heavier than any pink slip. Gwen didn't cry, didn't shout, she just stood there, still. The receptionist looked down as she passed. The young teller slid his chair farther than usual. A logistics staffer pretended to copy documents, though the machine was off. Everyone had something to do anything to avoid looking at what was happening. Gwen picked up the box, walked slowly toward the door. No one stopped her. No one escorted her. But as she neared the exit, the older security guard who used to hold the door open for her each morning leaned slightly and whispered just loud enough. "You've been audited by the woman who wrote the book." No malice, no sarcasm. Just a truth, quietly spoken with a lasting echo. Gwen paused for a second, didn't turn around, then kept walking. The bank's automatic door slid open. Daylight poured in from the sidewalk. She crossed the threshold like someone exiting a place that no longer recognized her. No applause, no car waiting, just another morning where someone is quietly erased from a system they once believed had their back. And inside, everyone left behind. There was a quiet understanding. This wasn't just one woman's ending. It was the beginning of an investigation that would no longer stay on paper. A week after Gwen's departure, the training room on the second floor of Summit First Credit filled up. No banners, no orientation, just 12 new employees from different branches summoned here in silence. They sat in a semicircle, each holding a printed questionnaire. Unconscious bias in customer service, occupational stereotypes, and your role. What do you see when you see a customer? The room was silent. No small talk. Just the sound of markers scratching on paper. Then the lights dimmed. A large screen lit up. No music, no intro, just one face in the frame. Dr. Lennox Caldwell. Hair tied back. One side of her face lit by a single lamp. Her voice came through low, firm, each word cutting through the air. Let me show you how to see what you've refused to see. No one moved, because that wasn't a greeting. It was a reckoning. The screen shifted. Footage played. Nia entering the bank, handing over documents, smiling, Jennifer's gaze shifting, Gwen appearing. Then the police. No narration needed. Each person watching knew exactly what they were seeing. And knew if they had been there, they might have stayed silent. 2. Lennox's voice continued. Bias doesn't wear a name tag. It doesn't yell. It doesn't say, I'm discriminating against you. But it lives in how you look, how you doubt, how you use words like policy to push someone out of the rights they walked in with. A white woman in her 30s swallowed hard. A brown-skinned man next to her folded his arms, expression unreadable. No one objected. No one cried. Just silence, and something slowly shifting in each mind. The screen showed 3 more past cases. 3 customers turned away. 3 people left without answers. 3 skin tones, but none of them white. Lennox closed with one simple statement. This isn't a moral lesson. It's a professional exam, and if you can't pass it, you don't belong behind the counter. The lights came back on. The screen went dark. The room stayed silent. No applause, no scorecards. Just 12 people, and one question no one dared answer out loud. Was I ever like Gwen? A month had passed. The autumn afternoon at Summit First Credit Bank looked like any other day, sunlight pouring through the front windows, tree shadows stretching across the sidewalk, and the hum of passing cars drifting by as if nothing had ever happened here. But today, something felt different. Nia Caldwell walked in. No more worn cardigan, no more timid steps, and she wasn't alone. Beside her were 3 friends, all black, all her age, all wearing the same expression, curious, eager, and quietly determined. Each held a folder in hand: birth certificate, scholarship letter, student ID. No one spoke, but they entered as a team, every step steady, every gaze unflinching. The front desk had new staff. No more Jennifer, no more Gwen. Instead, a young woman with a warm face and a name tag that read Malika, Youth Services Specialist. Malika stood up and smiled. Hi there, you all here to open your accounts? Nia nodded. Yes, ma'am, we've got everything ready. Malika reached out, not with suspicion, not with questions, just to take their folders. Her eyes didn't scan for mistakes. They looked for understanding. Thank you, all of you. Go ahead and take a seat. We'll go through each one carefully. I'll explain anything we might need to add. One of Nia's friends leaned over and whispered, It actually feels safe here. Nia didn't reply. She looked around and noticed something had shifted. Not the walls, not the floor, but the feeling of being watched was gone. On the customer info table in the corner sat a fresh stack of printed pamphlets. Financial Guide for Teens. Know Your Rights. Open an account. Open a future. Tiny text on the bottom right corner. Printed by the Caldwell Fund. Nia didn't say a word, but her fingers curled slightly, not from anxiety, from purpose. Because today, she was doing something right, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd been silently denied. Malika returned a few minutes later. Everything looks good. Let's start with the first file. Nia. Would you like to go first? Nia nodded. She stepped forward, placed her hand on the desk steady. She wasn't there to ask for permission. She was there to claim fairness. I'm ready. This time, we're opening the right account. After finishing her paperwork, Nia returned to her seat. No one said much. They didn't need to. Some moments speak loudest through presence. Malika called the others one by one, patient, gentle, clear in her explanations. That same bank lobby, the one that once made Nia's hands shake, now simply felt ordinary, even kind. Then, a man stepped out from the back office, black, around 40, glasses, tall, wearing a plain shirt. He looked at the teens and smiled. Nia lifted her eyes. She knew who he was not because he was famous, not because he'd met her before, but because her mother once told her about him. His name was Marcus Hill. 8 years ago, he came to the same bank to open a small business account. All his documents were in order. He met Gwen Talley and was denied. Not for missing paperwork, not for any violation, just because he didn't look like someone who needed a business account. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't sue. He just walked away. But he never forgot. After Nia's incident, the bank asked him to return not as a client, but as staff. They offered him the role of youth client supervisor. He accepted, not for the paycheck, but because he knew real change starts with those who were once turned away. He walked to the desk, nodded at Malika, and adjusted a stack of flyers. Sky blue cover. Bold letters. Know your financial rights. A banking rights guide for clients under 18. Bottom right corner. Published by the Caldwell Fund. Compiled by Marcus Hill and Dr. Lennox Caldwell. Marcus looked up and saw Nia watching him. He smiled, not overly friendly, not staged, just real. The smile of someone who once failed in this room, and now returned as part of the solution. Nia nodded gently. No thank you, no loud greeting, but their exchange said enough. History doesn't have to repeat if someone chooses to remember. At the counter, the teller handed Nia one last form, a basic step guardian information for underage clients. She took the pen. Read the first line. Guardian's full name. Nia paused for a second. Not because she didn't know what to write, but because she could almost hear her mother's voice in her mind. You don't need their approval to know your worth, but if they look down, make sure they read your name clearly. Nia leaned forward. Her handwriting was neat, slightly slanted. No guardian, just my mother. She audits quietly. She set the pen down. No cross-outs, no explanations. That sentence was enough. Malika read the words, smiled. I think your mother would be proud. Nia nodded. I think she always knew. One by one, her friends finished their forms, paperwork clipped, pens down, chairs scooted back. No applause, no parade. Just a small, quiet moment, but it weighed more than most. Because in the very room that once rejected her, today, she had written her name the right way. As the group stepped out of the bank, the sun had softened. A fall breeze brushed the sidewalk. The glass doors opened, then shut behind them. No one looked back. No one spoke. But if someone were watching from inside, they wouldn't just see 4 teens walking away. They'd see a generation stepping forward carrying something the system once tried to bury: faith in justice, small but unshakable. At the guest desk near the door, Marcus Hill still sat with a cup of tea. He didn't speak. He just wrote one line in his notebook. Today, 4 accounts approved, no apologies needed, no suspicions raised. That's progress without a megaphone. That evening, Nia placed her copy of the account papers inside her letterbox, next to her grandmother's letters, next to her first scholarship acceptance. She closed the lid, not as an ending, but as a beginning. Because now, she knew, not every fight needs shouting, not every win gets an audience, and not every person with power needs to speak loudly. A few weeks later, people started hearing about a small organization, the Caldwell Fund. No flashy ads, no TV sponsorships, just quiet, steady support for teens learning about money, rights, and how to protect their voice in a system that rarely listens. At the bottom of their brochure, one italic line reads, "Justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes she just carries a clipboard." If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.